I want to work on making cutlass. And if you're not sure what cutlass is, it is GitHub, Andrew Arrow, cutlass. It's a Swiss Army knife for generating Final Cut Pro XML files. If I go to the website, you can see a nice little picture of what Final Cut Pro XML looks like. The whole idea is that rather than spending lots of time in the Final Cut GUI to make your YouTube videos, you should be able to do a lot of this stuff just with one click. And so that's what Cutlass is trying to be. And so in order to do that, I need to be able to quickly record myself talking, the screen, especially from the command line. Because often I'll be going into Claude Code and I'll be typing things, and then I'll want to, like, for example, this is a sample prompt that I am typing. And I'm going to want some way to be able to easily note when a clip needs to be, broken into two. And so the way they do that in Hollywood is they have that big, clapper thing where it says, it's got the scene written here and it's got like this thing and it goes. Okay, so that might work because I can listen for that sharp sound. There might be other ways to do it by the transcription of the audio. I might be able to say like a certain key phrase, like for example, I might be able to say, and now let's let the AI bake. And then, I would go on here and I would type some more stuff and I would hit return. And then when it was finally done, I would come back and I would say something, and we're back. And then we could begin. So maybe that'll work instead of having to do the clap thing. Okay, so I now have Cutlass. If we do Cutlass, look at the main menu, and I look at the FCP menu, we've had a bunch of options in here for a while now, but there's a new one, add PIP video, add picture in picture video, which hopefully, if this all works, is what you're watching now. And how does it work? Well, I have a little sample run file here. Don't look at anything that's commented out because they're commented out. We want to be looking at these things. So it's going to add video of your first one to this new file I'm calling trip.finalcutpro XML. And then we're going to say add picture-in-picture video with a different file. They're both called test2, but notice one's in documents and one's in desktop. And we're going to pass in that same input, the same file, and then it's going to make, overwrite that same file. And we're going to get, something that we can open in Final Cut Pro, like, oh, I've just deleted that file, but here, let's run it again. So if, oh, actually, no, I can't run it right now because those files don't exist. But we'll do that at the end of this video. Okay. So how did we get here? And how is this working? Well, before I dive into the Go part of it, there is the part here in scripts called Hammerspoon, which is really important. If you don't know what Hammerspoon is, it's a little thing for the Mac where you can automate in this language called Lua every keystroke you might want to do. And so if you've ever tried to start QuickTime and start a movie recording and start a screen recording at the exact same time, you have to do a lot of clicking, and it doesn't help you just go live very easily. But now that I have this, I can just do Command Alt Control R, and then right away both the screen recording and the movie recording are going. It's got the right microphone. It's they're both in sync because they both start at the same time. And so that's step one in order to get these files, right? So now I do this, I record what I want to say, I do what I want to do on the screen, and then I'll be able to run, the stuff that we just talked about here in Run. I'll be able to have these files and be able to make it, and then that'll go over to Final Cut Pro. Okay, so how did I get Cutlass to do all this? Well, let's just look through the Git logs. And you'll see I have a habit of checking in with just very few words in my commit messages, because usually what happens is I'm trying to get something to work and it's not working, and I have to do a lot of work in order to get it to work. And so when it finally does work, I just can't wait to check it in. And I mean all the way to Git out. I can't wait to check it all the way in and do Git push, because I want that code off this computer and into the cloud just so I feel that confidence that this is a solved problem now, and this code will always be there. In fact, this is an open source repo, which makes it wonderful. I know that code will always be there, and so that's my urgency to check in. But there's another purpose too, which is having all these nice little save points is really helpful if I need to go back, because sometimes I'll be like, I'll go back 3 commits. I'll say git check out this, and now I'll be I'll go back in history basically and start from there, basically throwing away this one and this one, right? But so let's look at where all these things came from, because it's been quite a few commits since I paused the video, right? I got the hammer spoon one I just talked about, the tests are finally passing. When I use the word working, that means, oh my God, it's finally working. When I don't have the word working, that just means, all right, this is getting closer, but let's just check it in. And notice this says the exact same word, pip and pip. That's not ideal. If I end up with a lot of those, it gets very confusing to which one's which, but sometimes I'll do just at least 2. This is saying fixed path, there's another pip, more progress with pip, adding pip sample. That's it. This cartoon fixes is before we started this. So that's all of them, right? And so now let's look at, if I go back into Claude, if I hit up arrow here, it'll show you all of the prompts I used to achieve this, right? And so let's just go back to the beginning, because there's a lot of prompts, right? So, oh, here it is. Let's add cutlass FPC add video, and I'm giving it the exact command that it was currently working, and then I'm giving it my ideal command. I'm giving it the command that says add pip to video, and I'm saying add pip to video is new. It should add the second video, not as an append. That's what would happen if you just called add video command with the second video. But instead, add new logic for pip, picture in picture, and follow the samples in samples pip dot Final Cut Pro XML. Now, where did I get samples pip Final Cut Pro? So I made that, which is an important first step, right? Because as smart as Cutlass is, and it's getting smarter all the time to learn the format of this complicated Final Cut Pro XML language, it needs examples. It needs working examples. That's the thing that'll help it work the most. And so I went into Final Cut Pro, and I just did the picture-in-picture manually just one time. And I made it as nice as I could. I put a little shape background in it so it looks somewhat professional. And all the while I'm doing that, I'm realizing that, I'm just doing this once, because the whole point is to automate this, right? And so I don't mind doing it once. And then I'll save that, you export the XML, and then I constantly have this file to refer to. And you'll see throughout this session with Claude that, I ask many times to say, hey, check what you generated and check what's in samples pip, because they're not the same. Here it is. Compare file name, that's what I called it one time when I was running it, with samples pip, and fix your logic to have 2 video clips on 2 lanes. And one should be using the right crop and transports and shape masks to make pip like samples pip does. Okay, so it's basically, it's kind of a short prompt, but it's just giving Claude everything it needs. It's like, look, you need to change yours to do this. Because when the prompt before this, when I ran this, it wasn't even close. Like, it just had 1 video on the track. Right? Okay. So here it is. I'm telling it, fix your work. And we got into a little confusion here over the file name. Was I using trip or was I using file name? And so I finally had to just say, okay, fine. You want to use trip as the file name? We'll use that. And now we're getting into the things that it can't solve on its own. So after, Cutlass runs, it's able to do the XML linting just fine. It can make sure it's a valid XML file to the DTD file. And it's able to do a lot of tests we've written. But the one thing it's not able to do is actually run it in Final Cut Pro and see if Final Cut Pro likes it, right? And so that's the one thing I have to do manually, and then I'll get a GUI error. And in this case, Final Cut Pro says the media cannot be imported, and it gives this little error message, right? And then I gave it a little description of what was going on. It said the original file had no audio, but the new file doesn't, okay? So, and then we're going around and around this error. So this is, we got into a loop here where Claude got a little bit confused, and he started to fix the XML file itself, not the code, which is, it's in Claude. If you look at claude.md, I have tons of instructions in there telling it what this project is and what you should be doing. But every once in a while, it'll just, do something like that it shouldn't. And so I think we ended up in this, you're gonna see a bunch of prompts here with the same stuff, saying, hey, this isn't working, this isn't working. And I'm reminding it to look at the samples. Look carefully at trip and samples. There must be some difference still. Still, you got to look at this. Are you fixing just the XML file or the code that generates it? Because finally I started to realize, wait a minute, it was really important as this was happening, and that's how I decide when to check stuff in. I was constantly looking at git status to see which files it's changing. When am I going to check this in? I had forgotten to do that for a few rounds. I wasn't really checking git status. And so all of a sudden I did, and I noticed, wait a minute, none of the checked in files are being changed. so then I realized, oh, it's making the changes to the generated file, trying to fix it there, which we guess would fix it. And I could click on it and open it in Final Cut Pro, and great, it would be fixed there. But the whole point is we're trying to fix it in the logic that generates it, right? So I finally clued into that, and Claude goes, oh, I'm so sorry. Okay. So then finally we fixed that error, and it wasn't quite perfect. So what happened was, I finally had the picture-in-picture, but it was that very basic picture-in-picture without the mask, which looks bad. It's just like a very boxy box. And if you look at some of my previous videos, you'll see that's how my picture-in-picture looked, because I just threw it in there, right? And so I'm telling it, look, we're almost done, but not quite, because this was important. Because I spent some time in Final Cut Pro when I made samples pip to make the shading in the little box just the way I wanted it, right? So I'm telling it, hey, you got there's more for you to do. So go look carefully at that. And then I took some screenshots because it was telling me there's no difference. So it actually told me that, hey, between the XML I'm generating and the XML in sample, they're identical. And I just know that's a lie, right? Because there's got to be some difference. And so to prove that there's some difference, I took a screenshot in Final Cut Pro of one of them, and then I took a screenshot of the other one, and then I saved them as box 1 PNG and box 2 PNG. And then I told Claude, hey, look at these PNGs, because Claude can look at images, which is wonderful. Claude can see images and understand them. And so that was enough for Claude to realize, oh yeah, there's a big difference here, because box 2 looked beautiful, and box 1 looks bad. And so Claude got confused here because it was really struggling to know, okay, where am I supposed to put the shape, shadow on this image, because there's 2 videos, and so it ended up moving it from to the main video, and it looked completely wrong. And then I started to think like, oh, it's having trouble doing this because I think it's like a layer thing or a lane thing where it's very subtle that this shape mask has to be in the right order, right? And so I was helping it understand that. And then, it got back to another state, but now we're right back into box 1, box 2. It hasn't been fixed yet. Be sure to study the sample because the correct way is in that XML. Because sometimes it started to give me all this stuff about how, well, I've got to research how to do this, and I'm going to try this new way of it. And I'm like, wait a minute. You don't need to research any new way to do this. The correct way to do this is in the sample. And so that's putting Claude back on track. The metaphor I like to think of is a bloodhound. Like I have this powerful, powerful bloodhound dog that's sniffing way better than I can sniff. But every once in a while, the dog starts to go and look at like maybe some animal in the forest left an interesting set, and it's going that way, and it's not the direction I want to go. So I have to really know that, no, you're the bloodhound that works for me. Keep going in the direction that I want you to go. Got back to this again. Finally I got to the point where it was all working, and I said, add notes to Claude MD, commit the comments to the functions, and add a test. These 3 things are really important so it doesn't constantly mess things up in the future. Claude.md is just all the notes of everything it's learned so that when you first start Claude, it's starting with some context. It's starting with some amount of knowledge of the project and the code. And that's not enough because sometimes there'll be specific things that you mentioned in Claude.md that it will ignore unless you have comments in the code referencing what you said in that Claude.md. They work back and forth. And then in the comments, it'll also say, remember, this is from Claude.md, and they'll use very specific words, so we're in sync there. And then, of course, I had a test. With this kind of coding, with this XML file, it's so brittle and so easy to just change if you make. So tests are essential because anytime a test breaks, then you can't go forward. You must fix what you did, and because I keep adding more and more tests, and so every test is important. And then as it did that, I noticed I don't run the test all the time. I only run them every once in a while. And so after it added this new test, I noticed, wait a minute, some of the old tests have broken. So it went and fixed that as well.